Did the US president pick sides with Saudi Arabia over his own CIA? A White House statement sparks concerns that Donald Trump will turn a blind eye to murder when dollars are at stake. I'm Imran Gata, and today's newsmaker is Trump's relationship with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. A highly anticipated report by the CIA over the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi has been met with a shock statement by the President of the United States. While the CIA is said to have concluded that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman ordered Khashoggi's killing, Donald Trump contradicted that assessment, saying maybe he did, maybe he didn't. Members of Trump's own party say that kind of response won't cut it, with one Republican senator tweeting he never thought he'd see the day a White House would moonlight as a public relations firm for Saudi Arabia. Republicans in Congress are not just taking to Twitter, but vowing to hold their own investigation into whether MBS is guilty of ordering a hit job on a journalist. So, does Trump think a leader of a country is above the law? Let's start the debate with this report by Haider Abbasi.
The world was expecting tough action from the United States over the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. Just days earlier, the CIA reportedly concluded the journalist's death was ordered by the heir to the throne of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman. But the US president is defying his own intelligence agency.
They didn't make a determination. And it's just like I said, I think it was maybe he did, maybe he didn't. They did not make that assessment. The CIA has looked at it, they've studied it a lot, they have nothing definitive. And the fact is, maybe he did, maybe he didn't.
Donald Trump says Crown Prince Mohammed had told him personally that he didn't order Khashoggi's killing. The president's being accused of letting Saudi Arabia get away with murder. Trump's statement has outraged many, including US senators, who believe bin Salman was involved in Khashoggi's death.
The language that was used, it was as if they were writing a press release for Saudi Arabia, not for the United States.
A group of senators, both Democratic and Republican, have requested Trump investigate the journalist's killing. They want the Crown Prince to be investigated under the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Act. That law allows the president to impose sanctions on a country or individual that's engaged in human rights violations. Riyadh rejects any allegations that Crown Prince Mohammed was involved in Khashoggi's killing.
His Royal Highness the Crown Prince has nothing to do with this issue. In fact, the National Security Advisor in the US said this. This was a rogue operation.
Last week, funeral prayers were held for Jamal Khashoggi in mosques around the world. But the Saudi critic's body still hasn't been found. Khashoggi was killed in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul on October the 2nd. Saudi Arabia has arrested and charged 18 suspects. The kingdom says the journalist wasn't meant to be killed, but to be persuaded to return to the country. His death has caused a global outcry and damaged Riyadh's relations with some of its allies. Germany has stopped all arms exports to Saudi Arabia. And France says it'll take punitive action if there's evidence to show the Saudi leadership was involved in Khashoggi's killing. But for Donald Trump, his country's ties with the kingdom supersede everything else.
This is about America first. They're paying us $400 billion plus to purchase and invest in our country. That's probably the biggest amount ever paid to the United States. This is over a long period of time. It means hundreds of thousands of jobs, billions of dollars of investment and product.
And it's not just money that's tying Trump to Riyadh. Saudi Arabia and the United States have been trying to isolate Iran. And the White House is working closely with Saudi Arabia to find a deal to end the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. But repercussions from Khashoggi's death are not just being felt in the United States. A Reuters report says that Saudi princes are pushing to have Mohammed bin Salman removed as heir to the throne. Although the Saudi foreign minister has told the BBC that any such talk crosses a red line. So has the White House sent a message to world leaders that business ties trump moral values and human rights? Haider Abbasi, The Newsmakers.
To discuss this, I'm joined now in Riyadh by Saudi Affairs Specialist Ahmed Al Ibrahim. In Philadelphia is the co-founder of the Conservative Tea Party movement, Michael Johns. And in Tampa, Florida is Ahmed Badir, who's the president of United Voices for America, a group that tries to increase the participation of minorities in politics. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us on The Newsmakers. Listen, it was quite the statement from the president. I'm going to pull out some excerpts, some chunks, and we'll talk about them thematically. Let's start with Iran and have a look at what the president had to say about Iran. The country of Iran, as an example, is responsible for a bloody proxy war against Saudi Arabia in Yemen, trying to destabilize Iraq's fragile attempt at democracy, supporting the terror group Hezbollah in Lebanon, propping up dictator Bashar al-Assad in Syria, who has killed millions of his own citizens. Let the fact check of killing millions of his own citizens slide, because it's not absolutely relevant. I mean, even at the best estimates, Assad is probably responsible for about 300,000 to 400,000 people. But Iran, Michael Johns, Donald Trump, is he accurately reminding people of the big picture here geopolitically when we talk about Khashoggi and Saudi, or is he disingenuously deflecting, and is it quite gross?
No, I do think he's accurately depicting the human rights condition in Iran and throughout the region, and that's an important message for at least the American population to hear, is that we cannot, in this sensitive moment, be judging the human rights conditions around the world by the conditions and standards we impose on ourselves. And while we stand for human rights and we want to promote human rights, the best way to do that historically has been one of proactive and constructive engagement. So everyone is a very, I think, universally upset and condemning of what's transpired in this particular case in Istanbul. There obviously are some questions as it relates to what our findings are. I do feel very confident that our government has a very good understanding of what's transpired in this case. And we also have, it's important to say, we've taken some steps. You know, I mean, we have sanctions that are being imposed against targeted individuals. And I don't think we're done. I think we're going to be looking at some other ramifications. I do believe, however, that it's a huge mistake for this to throw the whole relationship with Riyadh into peril.
Okay, so you want to keep the relationship. You feel the putting Iran front and center and at the very top of the statement was justified. Ahmed Badir, was it justified?
No, this is a way to pivot away from the issue at hand, basically describing to say that, yes, Jamal Khashoggi was a tragedy. However, there are bigger issues at stake. And because of Iran, it's a dangerous world, and Iran is behind all the terrorism in the world. If it wasn't for Iran, the world would be a safer place. Obviously, not mentioning the U.S. role in destabilizing the region. The U.S., you mentioned Syria, didn't mention the war in Iraq and how that destabilized Syria and the rise of ISIS and the rise of Al-Qaeda in those regions. But simply saying that because of all these dangerous things, we're going to have to tolerate some of the bad things that our friends who happen to be dictators are doing. It sounded more like he's a spokesperson for the Saudi government, justifying, basically, this is their line, that Iran is the biggest threat, and then going on to other parts of the statement about, you know, the war in Yemen, et cetera, which I'm sure we'll get into. But definitely, he is pivoting away to describe, to justify, in a way, what happened to Khashoggi.
Okay, so Ahmed Ibrahim, while the Saudis are under the microscope, your great ally, Donald Trump, is saying, oh, by the way, the Saudis might be doing bad things, but guess what? The Iranians are doing worse things. Are you happy about that?
Well, you know, let's go back and say if, let's say, Jamal Khashoggi or the case of Jamal Khashoggi never happened, you know, Saudi Arabia is always the villain. I mean, we are used to it so many times. So this is nothing new. Unfortunately, the Jamal Khashoggi case happened. Saudi Arabia actually have an accurate investigation on the matter. They are prosecuting the people who's involved with the situation, and Saudi Arabia had the correct story on what happened. not leaks like what happened with Turkey. So what Trump
hold on.
he's a
Ahmed,
wise man. And
you say not leaks like
and
what
he's
happened
very
with...
transparent.
Okay, but
Let me continue with your question.
Hold on.
So he's very transparent.
Ahmed,
so what he did
Ahmed,
actually, he put
Ahmed,
it up. You know, when he said
Ahmed,
there's so many common values regarding the economic between Saudi Arabia and
hold on. We're going to get to economics. We're going to get to economics.
We need to look at it more than anything.
Ahmed
Even the CIA report, it was denied by the foreign ministry and the White House said, you know, we cannot reach for the final, investigation.
You make a point. You say, well, no, the Saudis are doing it accurately. It's not like the leaks from Turkey. Come on, you're insulting our viewers. You're insulting everybody on this panel. If it wasn't for the leaks, the Saudi story would not have changed over the weeks. Initially,
Amran,
it was...
you should know better than that. You are talking about leaks since when you are an anchor and you actually take leaks and you bring it and you make it...
So what did the Saudis
put it on
first
the
say?
record. We have an investigation. We have detainees. We have people in the prison. People are prosecuted.
Ahmed, what did the Saudis
going to
first
go
say?
to jail. People are going to maybe beheaded. I don't know. But Amran, don't take leads. I'm not going to teach you your job, but don't take leads and make it a headline. It's leaks. We cannot make leaks. And we sort of
I don't want to pull rank here. Ahmed, I don't want to pull rank and say it's my show, so you can't just keep on talking. Hold on, Ahmed Badir as well. So, Ahmed, I don't want to pull rank and say...
I'm just telling you, it's your show, but this is nonsense.
Okay, so allow me to ask you a question here, Ahmed.
It's nonsense.
Ahmed, allow me to ask you a question then, right?
Go ahead.
By your theory, we would have then accepted the initial Saudi story, because you guys know best. You guys know how to verify. We would have accepted the initial Saudi story that he went in, we don't know what happened to him. And then afterwards, oh, well, he went in, but, you know, maybe there was a fight. Oh, he went in, but nothing to do with us. Oh, he went in, but now, okay, maybe some bad guys killed him. If it was not for the weight of pressure that came from evidence presented through the leaks, we would have had to accept the Saudis at their word. You're telling me we should trust them over everything else that came through. Ahmed, I'm going to put that aside because I want to move on to money. You brought up money, and this is an opportunity to bring out...
You can put whatever you can on the side.
Thank you, Ahmed, right? But I'm sorry, I had to set the record straight here. If we had to accept the Saudi story initially... Okay,
whatever you like.
Absolutely. He went in...
Whatever you like, whatever you say.
He went in and, well, we don't know what happened to him. Forget the Turkish leaks. Let's bring up money now, oil and money. The kingdom agreed to spend and invest $450 billion in the United States. This is a record amount of money. He goes on to say, they have worked closely with us and have been very responsive to my request to keeping oil prices at reasonable levels, so important for the world. And within a few hours, a tweet from the president, oil prices getting lower, great, like a big tax cut for America and the world, enjoy. $54 was just $82. Thank you to Saudi Arabia, but let's go lower. Michael Johns, is this what America First looks like? Has the mask just dropped? Is this 70 years of policy with the Saudis just laid bare? Is the president just being absolutely honest here that if you do big enough business with us, we'll allow you to kill whoever you want to?
Well, obviously, we have, I think almost 200 countries in the world, and if we held all of them to an impeccable human rights standard and, ceased relationships with those who had violated human rights, we would not have relationships with many countries at all. And I think that's a broader point.
But human rights is a reason why you don't have relationships with a lot of countries.
Well, it's been a considerable factor, but say in the case of Iran, the human rights conditions there are hugely deplorable. But they're not the only reason that our relationships have been strained. Their engagement and the support of being the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world is a primary reason. Their destabilizing position in the world. And many of the voices, I think, ironically, that have arisen calling for very strong measures in this particular case with Saudi Arabia had almost nothing to say as the Obama administration handed billions of dollars to the regime in Tehran, much of which ended up being used to fuel that very terrorism. So foreign policy toward any country in the world, and particularly in this region of the world, is immensely complex. It comprises many different factors. The answer to your question is the economic relationship is only one component. It's a very important component here, especially given Saudi Arabia's influence within OPEC and our trade relationship there and our military relationship. The reality is, yes, they could,
certainly,
if we ended up not being engaged in those things, simply turn to Russia or China, and I don't think the U.S. interest would be advanced.
And I hope you'll accept and understand. And Michael, I hope you'll accept and understand that during the Obama administration, on shows such as this one, we were questioning the relationship with these countries based on their human rights missteps and so forth, right? So looking forward, Ahmed Badir, is the lesson, hey, Sisi or any other ally of the United States, you can kill whoever you want to as long as you continue to do business with us?
That's the green light that Donald Trump is effectively saying. In some ways, previous presidents had this unspoken rule. Publicly, they would say one thing, but privately, they would handle these type of negotiations privately. Here, Donald Trump being frankly honest and in a blunt way, basically saying, if you give us what you want, what we want, if you spend your money here, we'll tolerate and look the other way. And this is a way, even though the Saudis actually promised $110 billion, they've only delivered $14 billion of it, and Donald Trump is asking for $450 billion. This is his way to publicly remind the Saudis, you pay up the $450 billion or we'll increase the pressure. This is, in a way, this is the guy that wrote The Art of the Deal. He's trying to make deals, and he's shaking down the Saudis and reminding them that, hey, you have this commitment, this pledge to spend now it's no longer 110 billion, it's actually 450 billion, and that's what it's going to cost for the Crown Prince to remain in power. If not, he leaves it open at the end by simply saying, well, Congress can do what it wants. Maybe he did it, maybe he didn't. He's leaving that door open so that way he could take further action if the Saudis don't deliver. In a way, he's shaking them down, and they're going to have to respond if the Crown Prince wants to remain in power.
Right, and you have people from within the Republican Party who are vehemently against him. I mean, once you get Lindsey Graham against you within your own party, you know it's serious. And as has been said, the CIA had a separate assessment, a different assessment. The president seems to have ignored that. Ahmed Al Ibrahim, is the greatest bonus here for the Saudis that you just happen to be so rich, which allows you to get away with things other people cannot?
No, actually, America is richer than Saudi Arabia. Brunei is richer than Saudi Arabia. There's a lot of countries are richer than Saudi Arabia, but Saudi Arabia is the only country actually that is stable the economy, the country that killed so many terrorists, prevented so many. It's a key player. It's better than Iran that probably you're praising, or it's better than other terrorist country that you're a fan of. But anyway, Saudi Arabia actually with other countries. Go by the United Nations.
Ahmed, listen,
Don't hold me on, Umran. You know, I mean, at the beginning you said that Bashar al-Assad actually did not kill 1 million. He killed 300,000 people.
Objectively.
One soul is enough.
I can get the Free Syrian Army on here who say Bashar didn't kill 1 million people.
The statement of Donald Trump is 700,000 between 1 million. You know, he only killed 300,000, and there's the 700. So you are waiting. So the approach, Amran, listen, the approach of how you're coming to the subject. I mean, you are defending the president of Turkey, Erdogan, where you're talking about the human rights, and he has over 100,000, journalists in the prison, and you never say anything. So this attack on Saudi Arabia and this propaganda, it will never finish. You know, Amran, if you want to be an anchor or you want to be a journalist, you have to take things in matter, and you have to weigh things right.
A respectable guest, you won't talk nonsense.
It's not going to make your show. It's
going to buy you more, guest, you won't talk nonsense on the program.
I mean, I don't know what's happening here with you. I mean, we're trying to set the record, Ahmed, and we're trying to say whatever matters, but you keep, attacking and tunnel vision on
the question.
It does not even exist.
Ahmed, did we praise Iran? Answer the question.
What is the question?
Answer the question. Did we praise Iran?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. A country like Iran, you've never mentioned that Iran. You're bashing Saudi Arabia. You always, praise Iran. Have you said that Erdogan have over 100,000 people in jail just because of problems with
this is what we're dealing
freedom
with,
of speech?
and let me,
the first thing that Turkey does is blocking Twitter and blocking YouTube and blocking Google, Imran. These things need to be fair and balanced, my friend.
Ahmed, can you answer the question? Is Saudi Arabia getting away with more than other countries because you're so rich? Can you answer the question, please, before without insulting everybody else here?
Because Saudi Arabia is heavy, is a key player, sir. Saudi Arabia is the only country. There is no other replica for Saudi Arabia in the world. We are trying to get the best. We are trying to work with the world. We are trying. Yes, we do have challenges. Yes, we do mistakes. But we are moving on. MBS is going to go to Argentina for the 2020.
Right.
He has the world to win. We have a lot of jobs.
Okay.
We've been attacked by Iran from the south, from Iraq, from Syria, Hezbollah. the challenges, the economic challenges. People like your kind self who not a fan of Saudi Arabia or anything that Saudi Arabia do. Damn if you do, damn if you don't. You know, I've been with you before women driving and after women driving. You've never changed your tone. So whatever Saudi Arabia will do, you know, people like your kind self and other people from the West. You know what's sad? It's your gentleman in Florida.
Do you have a problem with me,
and Ilhan Omar. We are going to see a new Lebanon, or America is going to be the new Lebanon of the West. And this is the problem, is saying non-fact to your viewers. I invite you and your viewers to come and stand on the soil of Saudi Arabia and know the truth.
Ahmed, seems you have a problem with me.
Yeah, we may not make it out alive if we do.
I don't have a problem with you, Arman.
No, you just spent the past 5 minutes personally insulting me. You've spent the past 5 minutes insulting me professionally and personally. What a waste of time. Ahmed Badir, let me go to one of the last points. Hold on, I want to go to one of the last points I want to bring up with regards victim blaming here. Right, Ahmed Badir, I want to go to the statement again. Representatives of Saudi Arabia say that Jamal Khashoggi was an enemy of the state and a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. But my decision is in no way based on that. This is an unacceptable and horrible crime. Later, he says, we have already sanctioned 17 Saudis known to have been involved in the murder of Mr. Khashoggi and the disposal of his body. The fact, Ahmed Badir, that he mentions that the Saudis told me, well, he's an enemy of the state and member of the Muslim Brotherhood, what does that tell you, Ahmed Badir?
He's smearing him while he's dead, in a way, putting it out there. Well, while I didn't take that into my decision. It wasn't a deciding factor, but by the way, this is what they accuse him of. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't, we'll never know, but he's putting it out there in a way to smear the dead man's reputation, in a way to further justify the actions, but it does provide a motive. In a way, for the first time, a public official, because this was leaked before, but now Donald Trump himself admits that Mohammed bin Salman told them that this person was an enemy of the state. Well, why was he killed? Because he's an enemy of the state. This was not a mistake. This was a deliberate act. It was carried out. The CIA determined it was Mohammed bin Salman that gave the order, and the CIA and members of the American political system and intelligence leaked that information on Friday because they're afraid that Donald Trump was going to try to undermine them.
Ahmed Badir, it is plausible that the CIA got it wrong. They've got this stuff wrong before, haven't they?
Usually it's the White House that gets it wrong. For example, the weapons of mass destruction, the CIA put out their report and then the White House put their spin on it. What Trump did was put a spin on the CIA report. I will trust the analysts at the CIA before we trust Donald Trump. I mean, this is a person that regularly tells inaccurate information. And then we're also not going to trust the Saudis because they lied about this killing at least 7, 8, or 9, 10 times. So the CIA and others are calling for an independent investigation. Definitely, they leaked this information. Donald Trump is isolated in Washington, D.C. in his defense of the Crown Prince. No one is saying in Washington cut off relationships with Saudi Arabia. America wants to continue relationships with Saudi Arabia. They're just saying that Mohammed bin Salman is the wrong person in charge. He destabilizes the region. He is volatile, and he is not, in the long term, is not going to be serve the interest of the United States. So maybe Donald Trump is thinking that in the short term, that Mohammed bin Salman can serve the interests of America, but in the long term, he's going to further de-radicalize or radicalize that nation, further lead to destabilize the region and further wars in the region. And in fact, many members of his own royal family don't want him to be in power. There are people that have already signaled in their reports.
Right, I mean, there was a Reuters scoop and a lot of people, apparently there's restlessness.
Right.
And we don't have time to get into that now. But we will soon, hopefully in another discussion. Michael Johns, very finally, given everything that's happened with this statement, you would agree yourself, even though you want to keep the relationship with Saudi Arabia, the statement was unique, was in many ways unprecedented, came across as quite unlettered at times and juvenile. Is this presidency and its relationship with the CIA, with Congress, with the State Department, the DOD, is it in a mess right now?
Well, if you go back to the 2016 election, I think the president is acting entirely consistently with what his campaign promises to the American people were. We mentioned earlier the Iraq conflict. You know, this is one of the first prominent Republicans, the first Republican president, obviously, to condemn and to say it probably was a mistake for the U.S. to engage in Iraq. And he clearly has been a critic of regime change, which has been a policy the U.S. has pursued to very mixed results, even poor results for the most part, since World War II. And I think he's defining a foreign policy that's rooted much more on a sensible level of realistic understanding of the way the world really works and what U.S. interests are. So from the standpoint of, say, for instance, the future governance of Saudi Arabia, that's not really a position, that's not really an end for the United States of America to be pursuing. That is really ultimately a determination for the citizens of Saudi Arabia, and they may indeed reach that conclusion.
Right.
Our position is one that countries should be respected in their right of self-actualization and accountable governments, and that means us not imposing our will of governance on countries and peoples of the world. And I think the president's operating constructively.
You shouldn't also protect them.
I want to finally say, I think Turkey has operated. We're not protecting them. We are advancing and defending U.S. interests. Let me ask you a question. What scares you more? A Saudi Arabia with the U.S. not engaged, or a Saudi Arabia with the U.S. engaged? I would say that at least on the margins, we have been a constructive contributor to improvements in human rights conditions in Saudi Arabia, and that an abrupt withdrawal would be detrimental to those ends.
I meant protecting Mohammed bin Salman, not protecting Saudi Arabia. Donald Trump here is going on a limb to protect Mohammed bin Salman, who is one figure, and there are hundreds of other people that could lead that nation. And right now, he's standing with Mohammed bin Salman.
Gentlemen, one thing I wanted to just work in, though. One thing I just quickly wanted to work.
You know, it's so funny. It's so funny. You know, mentioning the Crown Prince as if, like, you know, you're sitting in Florida and, you know, just talking about that Crown Prince.
Yeah, because we're invited to talk about it.
Just for your information, is going to live with you for 30 to 45 years.
That's what analysts do.
Now he's a Crown Prince and he's going to be a king.
Whatever he does, we talk about.
That's what analysts do.
Nobody in Florida is going to judge when Mohammed bin Salman is going to leave or when Mohammed bin Salman is going to stay.
Okay, let's see.
He's going to stay for a long time.
Okay, whatever happens, whether he stays or whether he goes, we'll be following it here on the Newsmakers. Gentlemen, we're completely out of time. I thank you for joining us, Ahmed Al Ibrahim, Michael Johns, and Ahmed Badir. Thanks again. Coming up on the program, extremists in Pakistan want to hang this woman. So why won't the UK give her asylum? And the cost of clean air. French motorists protest against a hike in fuel prices because of a new carbon tax. Is it what the environment needs? We need to take another look at the case of Asia Bibi, a Christian woman who was acquitted of blasphemy by a Pakistani court. Her family says they're now running from one hideout to another as extremists try to hunt them down. They're pleading for asylum, but so far no one country has stepped up. In fact, the UK Foreign Office has sparked a debate when it advised against helping her, saying it would endanger their consulate staff in Pakistan. With more, here's Shoaib Hassan.
After Pakistan's Supreme Court overruled her conviction, she's no longer on death row. Asia Bibi, Pakistan's most famous accused blasphemer, is free. But her troubles are far from over.
By their street protests, the Sons of Islam have said they are against the Supreme Court verdict. The Supreme Court's judgment, in which the blasphemer Asia was acquitted, the Pakistani people have rejected it. We do not accept any such decision which is made under international pressure.
In the aftermath of the verdict 2 weeks ago, protests by extremist groups shut down large parts of the country. Enraged demonstrators called for the government to be overthrown and also tried to incite rebellion in the army. Prime Minister Imran Khan initially said anyone taking the law into their own hands would be punished. But his government has since backed down and allowed the hardliners to file an appeal against Asia's sentence. But for Asia Bibi's supporters, it's media reports that she's being prevented from leaving Pakistan until the appeal is heard that are of most concern. Asia Bibi's defense lawyer, Saiful Muluk, has already left Pakistan and taken refuge in the Netherlands, escaping the fate of Salman Taseer, a top Pakistani politician. Taseer had also stood up for Asia Bibi and was shot dead by his own official bodyguard 7 years ago. The gunman, Mumtaz Qadri, has since been eulogized by religious hardliners in Pakistan. Malouk says that Asia and her family could face a similar fate if they don't leave Pakistan. A number of Western countries have stepped in with offers of asylum. Italy was one of the first.
We spoke with a tutor of the family, which is with her and with her family. They are in a secure location. They are waiting to go out of Pakistan, but this morning they were still in Pakistan.
Canada has also said it's in talks to take the family in. The UK is another possible destination, but the Foreign Office reportedly advised the government against it, citing concerns about possible attacks on British diplomatic staff in Pakistan. Nevertheless, many groups have called on the UK to open its arms to Asia. The Pakistan government says it has no objection to her leaving.
Whenever decision is made, she will go wherever she wants to go. It is a free country. She is a free national. She can go wherever she wants to go. No one can object to that.
So, will Asia Bibi ever be able to escape the wrath of extremists in Pakistan? Shoaib Hassan, The Newsmakers.
I'm joined now from The Hague by Asia Bibi's defense lawyer, Saiful Malouk. Thanks for joining us, sir. Is Asia Bibi safe?
I think she's the more wonderfully safe and being protected by the Pakistan's the wonderful forces, and there's no danger to her life.
How is she feeling at this moment? Is she in a good state of mind?
I hope she must be feeling wonderful. As a lady who was waiting to die at the death throat, she has been now acquitted after 9 years by the Supreme Court of Pakistan. She must be very, very happy.
Is it clear to you that she won't be safe to stay in Pakistan?
Yeah, unless whenever she's in her own living life, then she won't be safe.
Has there been any clear offer from any one country to give her asylum?
Yeah, I think day before yesterday I was in Frankfurt. I held a press conference and I demanded the German government to issue her, her husband and 2 daughters immediately the passports or the visas so they can travel. And I was told in the evening yesterday by some media people that the German government has agreed to extend her the immigration or this visa.
Okay, that's wonderful. Okay, so we're hearing that the Germans are reaching out. So are you confident that this will happen and the Germans will grant her asylum?
I'm sure. I think German people have really prayed a lot in the churches over 9 years, and there's a lot of love for Asia Bibi, and I'm sure the German government would respect their people and would do it.
Okay, that's excellent news to hear, and we'll be keeping a close eye on this, and we hope that you'll keep us informed. I just want to get your comment very finally before I let you go. I want to get your comment on what you make of the UK Foreign Office saying that one of the reasons why they don't want to grant her asylum is that it might put their consulate staff in Islamabad under threat. Your response to that, sir?
I think that is totally an unreasonable things to say, because any country who will give her asylum, their staff would be put in danger in Islamabad. I mean, that is absolutely no excuse, and it's not acceptable. The government has to stand on their legs, as they had been supporting her case for 9 years. Now she's free, and now people are thinking that anybody takes, the staff should be in danger. That's not acceptable.
Okay, well, Saiful Malouk, I hope that you will share the information with us and my colleagues who reached out to you for this interview as soon as you know, so that we can talk to you again, as soon as you have confirmation that the Germans have extended the offer of asylum to Asia Bibi and her family. We'd like to talk to you again, but for the moment, I'll let you go. Thank you very much for joining us here on the Newsmakers. Okay, well, let's take a closer look at the case for asylum in the UK and this potential offer from the Germans. Joining me now from London is security analyst and former UK counter-terrorism officer Charles Shoebridge. And we have Amnesty International's Deputy South Asia Director Omar Waraish in Colombo. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Before I talk about the UK, the most interesting thing for me, after having spoken to the lawyer, Omar Waraish, it seems as if the Germans are going to do this. How important is that?
Imran, there have been a number of countries that are prepared to give us Asia Bibi asylum. They may not say this publicly, given that it may create controversy. In Pakistan, there is a need expressed by the Pakistani authorities to keep any talk of asylum quiet while they deal with the protests. And of course, it would have security implications for their staff, their programs, and other work in Pakistan itself. The key thing right now is to be able to ensure that she's able to leave the country. Where she goes, she has a number of options.
Yeah, and that's going to be interesting because we have the TLP, Omar, and we have tens of thousands of people who took to the streets with banners such as Hang Asia, people who still believe she's a blasphemer and she should be killed for it. Is it a dangerous place for her? Is it absolutely impossible, in your view, that she could ever live in peace in Pakistan, even if she was acquitted by the Supreme Court?
No, I think it's incredibly dangerous for her. I mean, let's look at the history of her case. Governor Salman Taseer, who defended her in 2010, whose clip you showed earlier, actually, was assassinated by his own bodyguard, shot in the back 27 times. 2 months later, the only other senior government official who spoke up for her, Shahbaz Bhatti, then the only Christian minister of the cabinet, was killed outside his mother's home. There was a report in The Guardian the other day that people are going house to house hunting for her. I don't know how accurate that is, but it's certainly a sentiment that we've seen. And these demonstrators have basically said they're prepared to take on the Prime Minister, the Army Chief, and the Chief Justice. They've threatened the lives of the Supreme Court judges, and we know how dangerous it is. Defense lawyers have been killed, judges have been threatened. It's a very, very dangerous situation.
Yeah, many of us have read that Guardian article, and it is alleged that mobs are essentially going from house to house, going after her family members. Charles Shoebridge, it seems as if the Germans have extended an offer. We'll have to wait and see as to whether that actually happens, and we'll wait to hear from the defense lawyer. If it does happen, Charles, are the Germans putting their own security or the security of their own citizens at risk by doing so?
Well, to some degree, they are. I think the previous speaker has just outlined what the nature of the threat is. And of course, that threat is also extended to those that are associated with this case. But that doesn't mean to say that they're making the wrong decision, of course, because despite the fact that there would be some level of threat, I think that level of threat would be well within the capability of both the German and the Pakistani authorities to mitigate that threat. After all, otherwise you would have a situation where just by getting a few thousand people on the streets, and don't forget Pakistan is a country of hundreds of millions of people, so getting a couple of thousands of people on the streets, that could dictate whatever the policy of different countries would be if that's going to be the main factor in making these decisions. Therefore, I think as well, a lot of people have an interest in overstating what the security threat would be. Yes, I agree entirely, and I know Pakistan to some degree. I've been there before, and I've seen the situation, that she would be under great threat, and her family, if she remained in Pakistan. That isn't the case, I think, if she came to, for example, the UK or Germany. If necessary, her identity could be changed. She wouldn't be alone as a Pakistani Christian, former Pakistani Christian living in these communities or outside of those communities. And there are many ways of mitigating this risk and also mitigating the threat against personnel, for example, in Karachi or elsewhere. And so consequently, Islamabad, for example.
Right, yeah. So in talking about mitigating the threat in Karachi or Islamabad or elsewhere, because what's interesting is that the Foreign Office, in what they said, they didn't seem to suggest that if she comes to the UK, some extremist might try and murder her on the streets or so, but what they suggested was that there'd be trouble for UK assets within Pakistan. Charles, are they justified in saying, well, we just don't want the headache, that's why we're not going to go out of our way to reach out to her? Are they justified?
Well, first of all, of course, the Foreign Office, I don't think the Foreign Office, I still haven't seen that the Foreign Office formally said this, but I'm sure that you're right, that certainly in sources were saying this and in informal off-the-record briefings that this was the case. And also, of course, this was a message coming from Asia's supporters, that this was the attitude. I think that attitude would also prevail, or not prevail, but be present in, for example, German or any other Western government's thinking. They don't want the headache of being seen on television as going against what a proportion of the population in Pakistan want. But also, of course, there is, as you mentioned, a very real physical threat to staff and facilities and so on. But the Pakistan government, the Pakistan army and so on, it has the ability to mitigate that threat on the streets. And also, of course, there are many, many decisions made within the United Kingdom and elsewhere relating to foreign policy that would irritate somebody somewhere in Pakistan. I mean, there are so many diverse interests. And we've seen again and again where demonstrations and so on could take place. And so, again, we come back to that issue that I think the British government will be very aware of this, that if you send out a message that actually you're going to be governed by, effectively, as it's been called, mob rule, effectively a few thousand people on the streets of Karachi or Islamabad demonstrating, even if it's violently, against what your policy is, that shouldn't necessarily be the main factor that decides that policy. Having said that, I think there'd be some relief if this turns out to be true, that Germany has offered asylum. There will be relief amongst British policymakers and elsewhere.
Yeah, okay, and again, no confirmation, but we heard what we heard from the defense lawyer. You guys heard that as well, so we'll have to wait and see. Omar Waresh, let's talk symbolism, I guess, and precedent, right? So just like the case with Jamal Khashoggi, it's not just about the killing of one man, but if the killers of that one man get away with it, what does it mean for human rights defenders around the world? So in the same way now, if Asia Bibi can't get asylum in a country, what does that mean for minorities who are persecuted in a place like Pakistan or elsewhere? If she doesn't get asylum, what would that mean, Omar?
So I actually think that the key question actually is a slightly different one, Imran. I think it is, if the Supreme Court says that you are acquitted and you are innocent of the charges brought before you, and it can't implement, and the government can't implement that order and release that person and allow them to leave the country safely, what does that say about the rule of law in Pakistan?
Right.
I think that's the key question. I think the asylum thing comes after that. Right now, we're stuck in a situation where, and I mean, I frankly, I have to disagree with your previous speaker. Yes, mob rule has decided the policy of this government, of the Pakistani government. On the first day, Imran Khan said that he would support the Supreme Court and will stand up to the mob. 2 days later, they capitulated on the sheer threat from that mob, and they have insisted that she's not able to leave the country and that there will be a review petition in the Supreme Court. These mobs clearly want nothing short of her execution. Remember, that's not off the table just yet. So the key question is, what happens if the Supreme Court orders, when the judges are being threatened, can't be upheld? Then what hope is there for any justice?
Okay, so let's say the reality being, as unpalatable as it is for all of us having this discussion, the reality being that she won't be safe in Pakistan, and there's some ominous questions about what that means, even if you can be cleared by the Supreme Court, and then move that further. If she can't get asylum because everybody's worried that either their consulates or embassies might be attacked or some extremist might attack her within their countries, what does that then mean, Omar?
Well, that's a very, very sad and terrible situation. I mean, I think what this needs is for all of these countries, the international community, to say to Pakistan, you have to uphold the rule of law. And if we get this person out who has been acquitted by your own Supreme Court, you have to protect our presence in the country, okay? And you have to stand up to these mobs. They cannot decide government policy.
Charles Shoebridge, is this always a balancing act for governments between wanting to help people in dire need, but also trying to ensure that they don't have a massive security challenge ahead of them?
I mean, the short answer is yes, but just to clarify, let me deal with something that Omar just said. He mentioned that he disagreed with me because there is, in fact, has been a caving into mob rule by the Pakistan government. Of course, I hadn't actually mentioned that. The question was whether this was a situation that was relevant to the British and German and Western governments in mentioning asylum. And I would agree with what he says. So actually we do agree that there has been a caving in to mob rule. After all, mob rule really is the driver of this blasphemy laws in the first instance. The very fact we talk about the rule of law, I am a lawyer. If we mention that, of course, the law exists in the first place, that you can actually be accused of something as simple and really largely inoffensive as this person was accused of, and yet spend so many years on death row and then be faced with execution. That tells you a lot about the nature of the rule of law in a country such as Pakistan. And that also brings us back to your question in terms of balancing acts. Of course, we've got the situation, as you correctly mentioned, there are parallels with the Khashoggi case here, because here you've got a situation in Khashoggi and also, of course, with Pakistan and other countries where Western governments, particularly those such as Britain and the United States, that are very closely linked to those countries and have close economic, social and political ties, where they have to perform this balancing act. In many ways, Trump, for example, is being criticised quite rightly for not taking into account human rights, the rule of law, democracy and other factors in his talk about his relations with, for example, the UAE and Saudi Arabia. But of course, this applies to many countries around the world. And largely what he says is, of course, what other countries and previous administrations in America have not said, but they actually do. In other words, they don't want to offend their allies. They don't want to offend or put in peril governments that are important to them. And this applies in this case too. There is an element of realpolitik behind it. But nonetheless, I think it's possible, as I think has happened in the UK, to overstate the nature of the threat to the British embassy staff. I think it would be short-lived. In the past, there have been far more serious cases where, for example, if we think about Salman Rushdie case and others, where the British government did make decisions that it appeared, on, at least in the front face of it, to be the right decisions to make. And I think they faced far more and survived far more serious threats as a result of the decisions in that case. And so there is precedent for making what might be called courageous and right decisions.
Yeah, and there seems to be a meta connection between our last segment where we spoke about Khashoggi and this one. And you're mentioning Trump seems to almost distill the truth of it all and lay it all bare. His statement on Khashoggi seemed to be foreign policy on truth serum. And I think that's what makes it fundamentally so interesting for all of us to discuss this. Gentlemen, I have to move on, but it's been a pleasure talking to all of you, Charles Shoebridge and Omar Moresh, and of course earlier Saiful Malouk. Thanks again.
We're tired of this. We're getting milked like cows. I'm tired of always coughing up. I'm a father of 2. I have a family. I'd like to give my kids a good life, and I can't. All we do is pay. Pay, pay, pay. Enough. We're all sick of it.
In France, efforts to stop hikes in the price of petrol have clashed with an attempt to wean the country off fossil fuels. Hundreds of thousands of protesters have been blocking major roads, oil depots and gas stations. So far, 2 people have been killed and more than 500 have been injured. And as the government refuses to back down from a new carbon tax, which sparked the latest unrest, demonstrators are preparing for more mass demonstrations. Well, to discuss this, I'm joined now from Paris by Alexis Poulin. He is an EU affairs analyst and the founder of the Modern World News website. Good to have you on the Newsmakers, Alexis. For those of us looking at it from the outside, is this only about fuel prices and the fuel tax, or is there something deeper at play for those protesters?
I think it's deeper than that. The oil tax was the sparkle that made it all start. It's mainly the fear of the middle class going towards more poverty and fearing for the future of their kids. You've heard in the few images that you've shown that it's all about saying that we are losing buying power, we're not sure about the future, and we're paying a lot of taxes for public services that are not there. So the question is, why are we paying for? anymore. And the other main issue is saying, why is it always the same people paying for the others? Here what you have is that a lot of people in the streets, I've never been in the streets before, and they are protesting against the fact that the elites or the people like Emmanuel Macron and his government are not listening to them. And whenever they are voting, most of them actually don't vote anymore, or when they vote, they protest vote. And now they want to be heard. They want things to change, and the only thing that they are left to act is going on the pavement, saying, here we are, and we want now to be listened to.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, right, that for a centrist president, he's got protesters from both sides of the political spectrum, on the right and the left. Is that going to make it more likely that he and the Prime Minister, Edouard Philippe, are going to blink and are going to maybe, I don't know, take this policy away and rethink it?
So far, it's not the road that they've chosen. Edouard Philippe, the Prime Minister, was on TV on Sunday night and said that we'll keep on the same direction. This is the right thing to do, and we won't get rid of the tax on oil, because that's the plan. That was our program. We've been elected for that, so we'll keep on doing this. In the French island of La Réunion, there have been massive protests going up to riots, and the answer this morning from the president was, I will send the army. So the route that the French leaders are taking is basically saying we'll use violence to stop the protest. It's not that we'll stop and listen. Also, that, they say on TV, on radio, that they are listening, that they understand that there are anger and that people have fear for the future. But the answer is more policemen and army to stop the riots and the unrest. It's not about listening and going back on the oil prices.
Right. And as we were discussing about covering this story, we were joking in the newsroom that it's breaking news in France when people are not protesting, usually. So you have a protest culture in your country. There's definitely, it's part of the DNA, right? But how different is this one compared to other protests? Is there a dangerous aspect to this, that this could get uglier?
Yeah, I think yeah, as you said, we have this protest culture. Back to the myth of the French Revolution. We like this idea of doing a revolution every year also. We have Mai 68 in 1968. And I think what's different this time compared to protests that we've seen in the past is that neither the big political parties or the unions or association are part of it. It's clearly something that came out of thin air. People saying, oh, enough is enough. I'll start it with a hashtag on social networks and we'll see who's coming. And the problem is that the unions, so far have said it's unclear what these people want, so we can't join in and organize the movement. The political parties are looking and saying, apart from right-wing Front National or Rassemblement pour la France parties, or Jean-Luc Mélenchon from France Insoumise saying, we'll watch closely because these people are from the more modest people, and we have to listen to them. But apart from that, you don't have an organization, and that's what actually the power is fearing, is that it can't be organized. It's very difficult to find an interlocutor, someone to talk to, so they don't know how to react. They don't know who to talk to. They don't know what to do to make this framed.
Right, and yeah, and of course, on a place like Reunion Island, the context is very different to some of the massive cities on the mainland, right? So that makes it all the more complicated. Alexei, I've got to move on, but I look forward to having you back on the Newsmakers. Thanks so much for giving us a deeper insight into what's going on in France at the moment. And that's all for this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. You can check out more of our stories on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe. Until next time, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.